Okay, well, shalom, everyone. We are starting our study tonight on the Parasha. We're starting off with the Parasha from Lekh Lekha, which deals with Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father. And then we're going to move over to the second book of Baruch, which is in your Sefer for those that have your Sefer. And I'll be hitting that around chapter 23. Then I'll hit 23 through chapters 29, which is a little bit of touch and go on that from different topics that may be of interest that is not found. Well, it is found in our King James Bible. Some of the information is there, but not exactly the way that it is here. I think we can get a little more understanding on some things that are happening in the King James Bible that most people use today. And of course, we're going to hit on our BlackRoots science. We're going to look at, prayerfully, we're going to look at a little bit on causes of the sickness or causes of illness. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to, oh, if it'll let me. Okay, well, I'm just going to share the screen because it's not allowing me to do what I want to do. For some reason, my computer's been doing some strange things tonight. All right, so I've got my, this is not my Sefer. It doesn't have, even though it does have some of the books, it doesn't have all of the books that we have. But it has some of the things in the Catholic book, which is, Maccabees and stuff like that. But we're going to go to 2Baruk, which is in my Sefer. And I actually do have an electronic Sefer, but it's on a different device. I could not load it on this laptop that I have today. So Genesis chapter 12, again, we know this is Lech Lekha, and it's wow. Some of my notes disappeared. And quite a bit of information have disappeared, but that's okay. I can redo it. I know it by memory. Chapter 12, verses 1, the call of Abraham, and this is Lech Lecha. So it begins this story of Abraham. And remember, this is after the flood. And it is at a time when the father's going to start to prepare for the coming of the nation of Israel and the formation of it. But there's some things in the book of Genesis in this story of Abraham that also carries over in the life of Jacob. And that is going into Mitzrayim or Egypt. And we find some very interesting things, and we see some things that repeat in each of the generations from Abraham to Isaac and Jacob. There are some things that repeat in their lives. We won't touch on all of them, but there are some things that do, and it lets us know that when we do things, the decisions that we make do affect our families, our children, and our children's children. And when I say that, I mean that they will experience the same things that we did, because they oftentimes will make the same decisions when prompted with the same situation. And each of us we do go through some of the same experiences as our parents and our grandparents and great-grandparents. And so we have to make decisions to make the change in the rest of our generations that follow after us. But it all hinges on the decisions that we make. And we have to also understand that it is our desire that every generation advances more in life, in the betterment of mankind and in our homes. So Abraham, for us, in this generation and the generations following us, Abraham is the patriarch that begins the way. Not discounting Noah and those that went before him, but it's Abraham when we start to see the actual covenant agreement with a people on the earth. Now, understand also that before Abraham, they were doing these things, but this is an advancement of how our Father is going to begin to deal with us, even up until today. Okay, so Abraham 12:1, it begins with, now the Lord had said to Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show you. And I'll make a great nation and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you and curse him that curseth you. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. And so, and after the Lord spoke to him, Abraham did that. But again, in our King James Bible, it doesn't give you all the background details of what transpired in Abraham's life prior to that speaking. And of course, when we read the Sefer, we find more background, right? And usually that's what we do on this side. Last year we did that. We covered that in the Sefer when we were doing this Parasha. So I'm not going to really go into that now because we have it now. If there were new people came on tonight and wanted to, then but I will publish it on YouTube, this one, because I'm not going to get into a lot of secret things that we want for the children of Israel only. But we will do a little teasing on that. But Abraham gathered all his people and they left. And this is what happens with us oftentimes when we have to gather up our things because our life situation has changed in our relationship as to how we're going to live the rest of our lives. And for us, the big change is when we leave Christianity or Islam or whatever else we were doing, we all had to make a conscious decision to make this, because this is a life change. It is a paradigm shift, if you want to call it that, but it is a life change because of the way we grew up and the people we grew up with. And if they were in one of the denominations, the other denominations, then a lot of times they don't understand us leaving because our fathers, our grandfathers, oftentimes, and great-grandparents, they all came up in the same way, even in the same denomination, and many times in the same church, generationally in the same church. So, but when we come to the realization that, and we look and we begin to go back and actually look at Abraham's life and Isaac and Jacob, and we start to look at when Moses came on the scene, and all these things start to touch us in our spirit. And it's our spirit, man, that we really want to deal with in these sessions that on Tuesday night. And so there are spiritual implications to what is happening with Abraham. And one of the things we have to realize is that he was speaking to, and the Father was speaking back to him. Now, remember on 2 weeks ago and a week ago, we talked about how the earth was populated and how the people were, and when we talked about the Elohim, the powers, and how they were involved in the creation, and the Father was actually the creator, but he delegated to his mala'akim, and they actually did the work. They controlled, they do the wind, and they do the rain, they do the fire, they do all that, and they do the formation of creation, they move the waters. When he spoke it, his mala'akim went to work, or his his Elohim, his powers, went to work. And that's why people, and that's one of the things that you have to realize, is that people said that in Africa and that they were pagans when the Christians went there, and that they were worshiping many gods, but that is not the case. The word is powers. They were not worshiping the powers, they worshiped the one God. And they said that they worshiped God, but they actually worshiped other God, but that is not true. That's not a true teaching. They always believed the one God, but they realized, and if you looked at Jewish mysticism, I use that, they talked about we all came from one, and then it talks about, and we discussed a little bit of how the creation took place and how we came forth from him. But it was a spiritual happening that took place. And then we were, the Father actually dispatched and formed man in the earth in his image. And we may not have talked about the two creations, the first creation, male and female together at the same time, but it doesn't go into detail of what happened. But we do go into the chapter where it says, and the serpent was. So in that first creation, there was Adam and Lilith, is what they called her name, Lilith, okay? Lilith was the first woman created with Adam, co-equal in creation. And why I'm saying that, and why I'm saying this is, again, she usurped her authority and was thrust out. And again, without going into too much detail, she entered with the other side. She got involved with the other side because there are two trees, good and evil, and tree of life. She got involved with that, and with the spiritual forces. And this is according to the teachings, the oral traditions. Again, remember, now this is not from BlackRoots history, but this is from the mystical side of Judaism that teaches this portion. Okay, so we're doing comparative analysis, actually, because in BlackRoots history, we talk about the same creation, and they talk about the pre-creation before our time came on, when mortal men were created on the earth. So it's the same principle, the same concept. The only thing is, in Jewish mysticism, they talk about Lilith. Now, it's not openly taught into the general congregations or in the synagogues, but they have their study groups, the yeshivas, and they discuss these things. And so, again, Lilith rebelled, and she wanted to have authority over Adam. So she left and went into East Africa, okay? East Africa. They said she went to Kenya, I believe is what they said she went. Now, man was created in Chad, but she went into Kenya, and she has this. And so when you deal with the women in that part of the continent of Africa, they will have that same attitude as Lilith. That's not me. That's one of the teachings that is passed on in mystical Judaism. So anyway, when Kwan left, she was jealous, and then the Father said, okay, now it's not good for man to be alone. And they said they took the rib from man and created the woman, and her name was Kwan. And that's where Eve came in, okay? So the principle is this. Here's the principle that we pull out of this. This is it. When the Father does a creation, he creates in pairs, male and female. Also, the principle is, when he creates in pairs, he creates good and the adversary. And the purpose in that is just like you have hot and cold, light and dark. These are principles when we deal with, and we teach physics in Black roots history. So this sets up a perfection in creation because you have an equilibrium, it creates equilibrium in the universe, okay? Because you need to have that contrast, light and dark, hot and cold, male and female. And you know,
Lost your sound.
Happy birthday, Kim.
Why, thank you, pretty lady. We've lost your sound.
okay. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm gonna have to change the way I do my audio with this because this device doesn't work on this computer very well. It goes out on me. Okay. So I was in creation and I was with Quan. All right. So if my volume is good, we're gonna go with this. All right. So that's where, again, that's where the Jewish mysticism talks about Adam and Eve and Adam and Lilith. So, and the pairs in the perfection of creation, you need contrast. Also, that sets up the idea of free will, we are free moral agents because we get to choose to obey or disobey. That's important. That's important because that's choice. That's a part of freedom. And we notice that even in chapter 6 of Genesis, when we talk about the destruction of the earth through flood, he allowed even the malach or the angels to choose to have women and cohabitate with them. So this is all done for the balance in the creation or the balance in nature. Nature has a balance. Everything has a balance. And that's why you see him saying male and female, he created them. And then he says, I took the animals in 2 by 2. And when we get to the story of Abraham, we have Abraham and his wife, Sarah. So the male and the female are meant to make a whole person. The two coming together make a whole person. You are two different people from two different backgrounds, two different families per se, and you're coming together, even though you may be of the same ethnic background, but you didn't grow up in the same home. You may have grown up in the same community next door to you, but there's a difference in your home, so your thinking is different. And we have a teaching of the soulmates. And what happens is, in this complementary, this goes into the spiritual realm, which again, when we teach on soulmates, maybe we'll get on that one time. I don't want to go too deep into that, but that has to deal with when you marry a person, I'll put it this way, when you're born, when you are in your mother's womb, even before you go into your mother's womb, your mate was with you in the creation, in the Father's thought. You were already there. You were just not in your earth suit. And he had already prepared a time for you to come to earth. So when it is time for the dispatch to come out, you didn't come alone. You came in pairs. You have a mate somewhere, and it's a male and a female mate, not a male and a male, not two females, but it's going to be a male and a female because it balances out the creation. Abraham was able to be balanced in the creation through Sarah, his wife. She was his complement and he was her complement. Okay. When you marry, you are a complement to each other. You are meant to be a complement to each other. And what has happened is oftentimes, now, in the beginning, our forefathers, our parents, had a hand in our mate who we mated with, because it was they understand and understood that this was a spiritual union, and if we did it right, it would be you would be with your soulmate. And the grandparents, you know how our grandparents and whatnot, a grandmother especially, it's usually the women, because they are the ones that stay close to the Lord in prayer. They knew, but for some reason, and we know what it is, we've fallen away from that. One of the problems is because we were in the captivity and we lost our identity, we lost who we were, we lost our oral traditions, and we have adapted and were brought up in the ways of the people we're not supposed to be following, the nations, the Gentiles. And so we got away from actually marrying, for the most part, our soulmates. Okay. And the soulmate, again, when you are with your soulmate, you feel each other. You actually feel each other in the spiritual realm. You know when something is wrong and when things are right. You know, you just know. Now, I also believe that the soulmates usually find each other. Whether they know each other or not, they'll find each other. Circumstances, the situation will arise where they will find each other. But what happens in society today is because we have lost that Abraham and that Isaac and that Sarah and that, and that Rebecca, we've lost that concept of soulmates. We lost it. I mean, people talk about their soulmate today. Is that when you get your soulmate, it doesn't mean everything is perfect with your soulmate. Again, because you're opposites, you're meant to complement each other. And so we have to look at that, okay? And I didn't want to go that far into, but it's such it's such an interesting teaching on soulmates and on why things are in pairs, and why we have to fight against in our families, in our communities, this thing that's going on in the communities today. And we have to actually understand what it says in the scripture. And what the scripture is about is oftentimes because of the way we come up and we do meet that person and things are not like we desire them to be, we separate and divorce and we begin to become enemies. And you really are soulmates, but you've allowed something to come in to cut that asunder. And either of you, both of you can do it. It can be done. Outside forces will come. That's a part of Abraham's story, is that when he went into Egypt, because of the famine in promise in Canaan, he went in there with his wife, his soulmate. And what happens is the Pharaoh gets his wife and has his wife in his house because Abraham says she's his sister, which he told a half truth. And he said, but again, the Lord intervened because that was his soulmate. Okay. And so the Lord intervened and he was showing us something. Okay. He was showing us something. And again, that's in chapter 12, verse 12. That's where you start. Chapter verse 10, it talks about the famine and how Abraham went down and what was going on. So I wanted to hit on that a little because oftentimes, again, your soulmate, when you're really, and you're tied in together, there is a certain protection that the Lord will intervene oftentimes when things go astray. Now, if it's, but again, Abraham was fearful for his life and he acted presumptuously. But again, because of his favor and he was doing he thought he was doing, and actually he was doing what the Lord told him to do, is get away from his family, separate from what was going on, and he moved on. Okay. So that's where our salvation story begins, with Abraham. Our covenant begins with Abraham. And we know that down in chapters, as it goes on, this goes all the way to chapter 17, you know. And in 17, I'm cutting it short because I really want to move forward. It talks about the circumcision, the covenant and the circumcision in chapter 17, which is, again, we have to understand that this is dealing with spiritual matters in the natural realm. Okay. So let me move on to, let me switch gears because the time is moving on and I want to get into some other things. Okay. But I wanted to touch on Abraham, and I wanted to touch on that, the importance of the mate and how the father would intervene. And again, the balance in the universe, the male and female balancing in the universe. And you see that actually, again, in the book of Revelation, when it talks about the elders, the 24 elders, that was actually 12 pairs, male and female, from each tribe. And that's where you get your 24 elders from. And they're to be ruled that way. Our households are supposed to be balanced. Our leadership is supposed to be balanced. You have to have male and female in order to make it complete. And so we have to remember that, all right? So in book of Baruch, chapter 23, 2 Baruch, chapter 23, to make it quick, that's going to be on page 766 in your Sefer. And I'm only going to touch on a few points. If you have any questions or anything you want to say, just chime on in. You have control over your mutes. I'm not touching the mutes. All right. So I'm going to stop my screen share because I don't really have anything on this. I'll stop the share. Okay. Because it really doesn't show you in that Bible that I have there. Okay. So in Baruch, 2 Baruch, chapter 23, and this is, Baruch is talking, he's a prophet. Now, again, the reason I'm doing this is because I want us to understand that the angels still talk to us, are willing to come and counsel with us and help us when we're sincere and when we're obedient. We're striving to be obedient. They will come and talk to us. Now, there's many instances in Jewish mysticism today where these books were not written today, but these were the manuscripts that were found in caves and things. And they discuss how the angels came, and not only the angels came, but prophets came and talked to them while they were in meditation. Okay, they had visitations by the prophets. And remember also now, it brings up the point that when we're studying our oral tradition of BlackRoots history, in the oral tradition, they talk about conversing with the elders or the angels. So they were constantly doing that. And I'll relay this to you also from the studies that I've done, is that in West Africa, before the Europeans came in Ghana, the rulers of Ghana, the kings, the elders, I say the elders in Ghana had already forewarned the Ghanaians and those that are around in the West Coast, West Africa, that the Europeans were coming. 100 years before they came, they had already told them that they were coming and what they were going to do. And they were trying to recruit or to unify the other nations around in West Africa to prepare for when they came so that they could defeat them, but they would not obey. And that again falls in line with scripture, because remember, the West Africa was actually really populated by a lot of us Israelites, and we were mixed in with the Hamites. Of course, they knew us, that we were different because our customs and our practices. And so they waged war against us when the whites actually showed up. So here, Baruch, being a messenger, he says, verse 20, in chapter 23, in verse 1, it says, and I answered, and this is a discussion that's going on with him and the angels. I'm not starting at the beginning because it'd be too much. And I want to get to 27 is what I want to get to. It says, and I answered and said, not so, O Yahuwah, my Adonai. Now notice he's talking, it's as if he's talking directly to the Father. But we understand that this is an angel dispatched in the name of the Father. And so when you're speaking to an angel or the messenger of God, you're talking directly to him. All right. The only reason he sends the angel in his stead is because no one can look at his face. Okay. And in our oral tradition, it is we teach that we are children of God, so we are God-like. And it is okay to call ourselves powers. I should say that we're powers, not gods, but powers. We have authority in the earth realm, and that authority is given to us by our Father. So when we talk to people about Torah and things in Torah, it's as if the Father himself is speaking, especially if we are obedient to the call. It's just as if they're speaking directly to the Father. So we have to be very careful. And that's why it's important for us to understand what true blasphemy is when we misuse the power that we have been given through the Father, and we misuse people and the creation. We are stewards of the creation in all, okay, in totality. So this angel is speaking, and he says, my Lord, and in verse 2 it says, and he answered and said unto me, why therefore are you troubled about that which you know not? And why are you ill at ease about things which you are ignorant? And that's us many times. We get upset about things that we shouldn't even be bothered with because we don't even understand it. And so he's telling me, you're worried about something you have no understanding of. He says, for as you have not forgotten the people who now are those who have passed away, so I remember those who are appointed to come. And he says, because when Adam sinned, now this came directly from the oral tradition, from BlackRoots science. It says, because when Adam sinned and death was decreed against those who should be born, then the multitude of those who should be born was numbered. And for that number, a place was prepared where the living might dwell and the dead might be guarded. So remember, in BlackRoots history, it teaches us that, well, it was 1,800,000,000 is the number decreed. Okay. So it says here that that number, it was numbered, the people that would be here. So now it may not be a correct number because, again, this is oral tradition. And when we, well, I can't even say that because their teaching was different than the way they learned things and memorized. Their minds were much sharper, and so they could remember things better than we do. We've fallen so far away that we can barely remember yesterday. But they could go line by line and tell you the names and what dates and all that by memory, and they were trained to do that. But they had help from the Holy Spirit. Okay. So he says the people enough. So there's a number of men on the earth that are to be born. Okay. There was a movie called, oh my, what was that number? What was that book? Something that talks about the Gulf. There's a certain amount of numbers, and they call it a Gulf. The Gulf is a body or a holding place for the souls. The Gulf for the souls are stored. And he said he got down to the last soul, and Demi Moore was in it. And and so it talks about the souls, the last soul that would be born with her child. Okay, so, and the Gulf had to be replenished and such and such, but they get those teachings from here. This is where they get the kind of stuff from that things that the books that were taken out of the King James is where they get those stories from. And you wonder where they come with that stuff. How did they think? They didn't think of it. It was already written in the scroll. We don't have it, but they have it. Remember, they robbed the temple. They robbed Timbuktu, and they robbed Egypt of all that knowledge. That's our knowledge. They have it, and we see it on the movie screens. Okay, they didn't think of it. They didn't make up with it. They stole it, and they're using it. Now, in there are some things. If you watch those movies, you'll see things that will bring to your remembrance. That is something that is your subconscious, in your DNA. It will come forward. Okay, there are things in us that we don't even know we have. Right, and that's from our fathers. Okay, it says now. Okay, so he said there's a place that they may dwell. It says before therefore the number of foresaid is fulfilled, the creature will not live again. For my spirit is the creator of life, and hell will receive the dead. And again, it is given to you to hear what things are to come after these times. For truly my redemption has drawn near and is not for far distant of aforetime. So this is talking about the time of the redemption. Now, I'm not going to go to 24 and 25. I'll leave that to you. No, let me go to 25. I'm going to go to 25 and get down to 27 pretty quick. All right. We got plenty of time. It says in chapter 25, okay. Of course, chapter 24 talks about the seraphim being open, and we talk about that in the book of Revelation when the books are open. Okay, but in chapter 25, it says, and he answered and said unto me, you too shall be preserved till that time, till that sign which El Elyon will work for the inhabitants of the earth in the end of days. Now, we're always talking with the end of times, and we don't know when the Lord is going to come back. Nobody knows when it's going to come back. But he gave us some signs, some things to look for, okay? Some of it's here, and some of it's, well, actually, everything that's in the Torah or in the King James is in this Bible, okay? So we can see many more of the signs that we can look for before the coming of the Messiah. And when the things come upon the earth, we will not be confused because we've already studied it. So we're studying this tonight because I didn't, this is something the Lord evidently wanted us to know because something is happening. All right. He said that this in verse 3 says, this therefore shall be the sign when a stupid, it says, when a stupid shall see the inhabitants of the earth, and they shall fall into many tribulations. And again, when they shall fall into great torments, and it will come to pass when they say in their thoughts by reason of their much tribulation, Elohim does not no longer remember the earth. Yeah, it will come to pass when they abandon hope that the time will then awake. So we haven't gotten there yet because we're still preaching on the corners. We're still in the churches going things. So we know we haven't got to that point yet, that we're in a stupor and saying that it's not going to happen. Right? That we know it now because we're talking about it now and we're still believing, we're trusting, we believe in scripture. So that time doesn't happen, but it did happen before. It hasn't happened to our generation, but it did happen before. Okay. It did happen before. And the temples were destroyed. Both temples were destroyed when these things happened. Okay. So now in chapter 26, a short chapter says, and I answered and said, will the tribulation, which is to be continue a long time, and will that necessity embrace many years? So when all this comes, remember we talk about 3.5 years of tribulation, and then 3.5 years of peace, and then tribulation 3 years after that. But watch what it says here. And he answered and said to me, into 20, and we studied this last year, actually. This is a review. Into 12 parts is the time divided, and each one of them is preserved for that which is appointed for it. Now remember, there's nothing new under the sun. So when we look at the other generations, and if we look at the earth was formless and void, if we could go into the others manuscripts, we'll find the answers that they went through these same steps. So these same steps happen in every creation. Okay, every generation, they go through these steps. I remember reading some time ago about Rome before it fell, that it said morality is not scarce, but it has ceased to exist. Talking about morality, it has ceased to exist in Rome. And in every civilization, remember at the time of Noah, what happened at the time of Noah? See, they had gone through all of these steps. Remember what the giants were killing people and all the torments were going on? You'll find those things in these elements right here. That's why I'm bringing this back, because we start looking for these things in our time frame. So it lets us know. Yeshua said, it talks about the trees when they when the seasons change, you look at it and you know that something is about to happen. When the clouds come up, you know it's about to rain. So there are signs that we look for. So the scripture has shown us the signs to look for in our generation to see if we're approaching the time for Machia. So here it says, the first part, it says in the first part, and I'm talking about there's 12 parts to this. The first part, there shall be beginning of commotions. So that's like, little things happening. You start seeing, they were in, you could say like, the temple was destroyed, Israelites were scattered, and things were going on, okay. So now we, and then the, things started happening. You used to have these little skirmishes and things like that that go on. It says, and in the second part, there shall be slayings of great ones. Now, the great ones, who would you think the great ones are? They would be your spiritual leaders and your. Remember, they killed the prophets. The great ones are the children of the Most High. They would come from the great ones. We are called the great ones. So if you start seeing them killing the children of the Most High, which are the great ones, actually, not kings, but it's actually the children of Israel, the spiritual leaders. They start killing them. Why do they do that? Because they don't want the knowledge of God to go out. They don't want the knowledge of the kingdom to go forth. So they kill those who are the scholars and the teachers of the people. Okay, those are your great ones. Those are the true great ones. Okay, that's the second part. And then it says, in the third part, the fall of many by death. Okay, we see in that all the time. People are dying for different reasons. Now, a lot of people die. They really, when it's the righteous people, we transition. We don't die. We just transition. Many of us, all of a sudden, we're just gone. And we're seeing that today. We're seeing that today. But we're also seeing number one, and we're also seeing number two. Okay. And this is number three, right? The third part. And in the fourth part, the sending of the sword. Right now, we're seeing China flying their airplanes, and Russia, they're stretching their muscles, and we got wars everywhere, and people are right here in the streets of Houston, they're killing people. That's the sword, right? That's death. That's war. That's turmoil. That's, killing of people, all right? And then in the fifth part, there's famine and withholding of rain. Now, we're going to go through a part coming up pretty quick here again. Now, we have famine. Now, these things happen all over the world, not just in one place. These things are happening all over the world. Famine is happening, and it's going to happen here pretty quick. That's why we're reading this. It's going to happen pretty quick. Okay, and we have different places now. So there's going to be famine and the withholding of rain. Now we're getting our rain. The reason we're getting rain is because we're still here, right? So we're getting our portion of rain. All right. So, but it's going to affect us as well. The rain is going to stop. And when the rain stops, we understand what season we're in. All right. Understand what season. Right now, we're getting rain. If we ask for it, we get it. If we need it, we get it. But there's going to come a time, just like it was in Noah's time. It got to that point where it was going to happen. And it affects everybody. In Egypt, it affected the Israelites as well. Okay? Don't think it didn't affect them. It did affect them. Okay? It says now, that's the fifth part. Famine and the withholding of rain. And in the sixth part, earthquakes and terrors wanting. Do we have earthquakes? My sister told me earthquake up in Chicago. We've got earthquakes just not recently. And for a while in Oklahoma, they were having tremors every day. But we're still having earthquakes, but all over the world. These things are happening. They're not isolated, but it's happening all over the world. If you check the news, it's all over the world, earthquakes. And then after that, the eighth part, now we have to look at this now. Eighth part, a multitude of specters and attacks of Shadim. Do you know what the specters are? Specters are spirits. What do spirits do? They have to have a body to do evil. Now, you might be able to see a spirit, but you're not, the effects of it is when he enters a body or when it enters a body, when somebody submits to the spirit. And so the spirits, and it says, and attacks of the Shadim. Now, Shadim are demons. So when you see people being killed and you say it must be a demon in that person, well, yeah, it is. And some people have the spirit of discernment, can actually see things. All right. And the, so that's, you will experience it. Okay. That's what it's happening today. Spirits and demons. Okay. Tremors, these things are happening today and people are being attacked. Now, one of the demons you can look for, and I'm going to tell you this just like this, and from the mystical teaching or from spiritual teachings, it tells us that before a child is born, there's two spirits there, entities there, one from the one side and one from the other side. One is male and one is female. And if the female dominates a male, he begins to act like a female. And if the male spirit dominates a female, she will act like a male and think that she's actually male. So when people say that they were born that way, it's because one of the spirits entered into them and overcame their spirit and dominated. And that's why they say they were born that way. And that's how it happens. It's a spiritual attack. It's one of these specters, or that would be a specter, because the demon is worse. The demon goes out and kills people. You see, he actually, once he gets into a body, he does real damage that way. The other one, again, can be imparted in different ways. But again, it's a spiritual thing. Now, we don't talk about it that way in society, but in fact, that's what it is. Okay. And some people now there are different kinds of spirits that operate in this realm, but they all come from the other side. Think of it this way. We know the fruit of the Spirit through the Holy Spirit. The other side is opposite of the fruit of the Spirit. They're the opposite. So if there's, kindness, there's meanness or evilness, right? So there's the opposite of what the Holy Spirit is. And you watch people's lives, how they're being controlled by the other side. Okay. So it says, now that was number 8. And then the ninth part is the fall of fire. Now, the fall of fire, California's on fire, Israel is on fire, all over the world. There are different places. In Europe, they're on fire. You used to didn't hear about that much in Europe, catching on fire, but they're in fire. Fire is everywhere. Again, it's happening. These things are not isolated to one part of the world, but all over the world. And the 10th part is repine and much oppression. And that's, again, people are rebelling now because of what's happening. That they call it oppression or whatever, and repine. That's why over in Europe and everywhere, even in Southern Africa, these things are happening. And people are rebelling against it. They're rising up against that oppression. We're rising up against oppression here in the United. Well, that's a common thing here, but it's happening again all over the world, right? And you pay attention to the news and you see these things happening, but that's letting us know, all right? That's giving us the signs of the season that we're in. And it says, and the 11th part is wickedness and unchastity. Well, we
I have a question, Rabbi.
okay.
Okay, on the where it said the 6th part with the earthquakes and the terrors,
Yes.
what happened to the 7th?
Did I miss the 7th? Where's the 7th?
That was just not on here. So would that be considered 6 and 7?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, that's it. Earthquake, yeah, and terrors, yeah.
Oh,
Okay. And then yeah. I'm glad you caught that. I missed it. I've numbered them. Okay, there it is. Yeah, I got a underline under it. I underlined it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now number 12. When I get to number 12, confusion. No, number 12. Wickedness and unchastity. That's number 11. Well, turn on the TV again. Or just go to the store. The unchastity, and the wickedness. I mean, it's, things, you see it on the news. We see the wickedness and how people treated other people, and just people are, these people that are being abducted and killed. All that stuff comes from here. It's letting us know, and it's on the increase. Notice that it's on the increase. It's not decreasing, but it's increasing, and it has nothing to do with the economy. I mean, the economy does play a part in it, but these people are wicked anyway. And unchaste, I knew, that's been building and getting worse. Every year, it's getting worse. Okay. And the 12th part, confusion from the mingling together of all these things aforesaid. So number 12 is, as I said, it says confusion from the mingling together of all those things aforesaid. So when you see all these signs, number 12, when you're at stage 12, you see all these things mingled together. Now, do we see those things mingled together? All over the world. All over the world. Yes, these things are happening all over the world. So that just lets us know that, the season is getting ripe for the end of the age, but we're not there yet. Okay, but we're approaching that time because, again, we're going to look for shortages of food and stuff like that to begin to happening. And that's what people have been saying. And because the trucks can't get through and you can't get the workers and all this kind of, and I've gone into the store and there are a lot of things that I used to get in the store on the shelf that are not there and haven't been there for a while. Okay. And so the news is out that, they're trying to get people to come back to work, because they can't get people to work. And again, especially in the trucking industry. I'm not out there that much, so I don't, I'm not out like I used to be when I was going to work and really out there. So I don't see it as much, because I don't go to the ports anymore. I used to, at least I'd be out and get ready to go out on a ship or something. I go to the ports and I could see the barges and things, but I don't see them because I don't go out that way anymore. But, but I get the news, I get the word of from other people that I know. So now I'm going to go over to okay, yeah. Okay, in verse 20, in chapter 28, I'm going to go down to chapter 28, then I'm going to go over to BlackRoots history. But I want to go to chapter 28 in your Sefer and just look at verse 6. And this is talking about the 12 signs that we're looking for the end of the age. It says, is it in one, he's asked a question. Baruch is asking a question. He says, is it in one place or in one part of the earth that those things are to come to pass, or will the whole earth experience them? That's the question. That's the big question. And the answer, and the angel said, and he answered and said unto me, whatsoever will then befall will befall the whole earth. Okay. Therefore, all who live will experience them. Listen to that. Okay. It's going to befall the whole earth, and everybody's going to experience the things that we're seeing happening right now, and we are experiencing it. People are dying. People in the church are dying. People outside the church are dying. People are being killed. You know, no matter what walk of life, people are being, all these things are happening that we just spoke of. And these 12 signs, they've all happened and are happening. The fires, you know, droughts and famine, oppression, all this stuff is happening at the same time in the earth, just like it was in the days of Noah. Just like Yeshua said, he said, just like in the days of Noah. Okay, and so what he's saying is, if they hadn't taken this book out of the King James, we would already be preaching on this from this passage on Sundays. We would have been preaching this on Sundays. But in our churches, we only had 66 books, and we didn't have this. Okay. I said, and I look at the Catholic Bible, it really doesn't have this Baruch. It only has one. Okay. All right. That we, you know, so this, again, this is just more to enhance our understanding of the time that we're living in, so that we can prepare for it and it won't slip up on us, take us by surprise. Okay. It says, for at that time, I will protect only those who are found in those self-same days in this land. But he's talking about the land of Israel, right? He says, and it shall come to pass when all is accomplished that was to come to pass in those parts, that Hamashiach, the Messiah, shall then begin to be revealed. Okay. So we know that when Mashiach comes, he's going to send forth the angels out to gather us from the four corners of the earth, to get us into the land. And the reason why he's going to bring us into the land is so that we can be protected. That's what the protection is going to be for us. And that is a number that is already numbered, okay, of us that are out there. So I think it's probably going to wind up being like 1 billion or something, that's us dispersed around the world. 1,800,000,000 of us all over the world to be gathered into the land. And the land of Israel, the borders are going to expand to what it originally was when Mashiach comes. So it says, let me read that again. It says, and it shall come to pass that when all is accomplished, that was to come to pass in those parts, that Hamashiach shall then begin to be revealed, and Behemoth shall be revealed from his place, and Leviathan shall ascend from the sea, those two great monsters which I created on the 5th day of creation, and shall have kept until the time, and then they shall be for food for all that are left. So there are some things that are revealed here, again, that we don't have in our King James Bible, things that we can look forward to. So people say we don't know the time or the hour, and Yeshua said we don't know the day or the hour, but the Father has set the time, but he gives us signs of the time so that we can be aware. We may not know the exact day, but we know that based on what we see in the earth, okay, that is close to the time for Mashiach to come, which means that the end of an age is coming, okay? And so we're being aware of that. We're becoming more aware of that. And I say again, during that time, he's going to send back manna again. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. So down at verse 8 in chapter 29, it talks about the manna returning during that time of Mashiach. So he's going to feed us. Now on that, again, just as it says in Revelation about the trees bearing the fruit, that's all here in chapter 29 of 2 Baruch. So I'm going to stop that part right now, and let's move over to, let's see if I can find what Sister Beverly was asking for. And let's go to that. Let me see, let me share my screen. All right. So y'all can see my screen now? Yeah, okay, I got you. All right, so this is the causes of illness. Now we're looking at this together now. This is from our oral, from what has been deemed our oral tradition for the children of Israel. And this was lost to us in the diaspora. These are some of the teachings that are in, again, are taught amongst the Israelites on the continent of Africa in the various 12 tribes, or 10, well, there's 12 tribes there now, actually, not just 10, but 12 of that now. They're there. And not only there, but all over the world. We're scattered all over the world, but there are 12, I think there are 12. We used to be 10 tribes, but after the temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed, many of them did escape into the continent of Africa. And of course, they gravitated to the West Africa and Mali and you know, around Tunisia. Tunisia is what I was thinking about. Tunisia, they have a big community up there. Jewish, they call them Jewish communities up there. So when you get to Morocco and stuff, they're called, and they're spreading the Jewish thing around all over the place. It's us from the diaspora, especially in the Americas, that go by Israelites proper, and some in Israel, in the land of Israel, prefer to be called Israelite after our forefathers. So this is one of our oral teachings from BlackRoots Science. You'll find this, you used to be able to find it in Egypt. But when the Europeans, the Greeks and the Romans and all the motherfuckers went over there and robbed, were tomb robbers and robbed out, you know, we had a big library there in Alexander. Of course, they robbed the temple in Jerusalem, and they robbed Timbuktu. They stole a lot of our written manuscripts that were there. So not only was it oral teaching, it was also written down. Now the Islam, the Muslims have a lot of the documentation because they were big on education and learning. They were big on learning and the sciences and things. And of course they traveled to Africa because that's where the seat of knowledge was, Timbuktu, you know, places like Cairo and Alexandria, places like that. They had the knowledge. A lot of that's where Maimonides was in Cairo and in Alexandria, and that's where he actually, I think that's where he died. And then they buried him in Israel, but he actually was there. And so a lot of them, there are a lot of Israelites, and now they call themselves, a lot of them call themselves Jews, but on the continent of Africa with our truths. Now the Westerners or the Europeans have our information, but they don't understand it. And that's why we have, again, that's why we have books like the Zohar, because they tried to take our teachings and they couldn't decipher it. So our elders that are still on the continent of Africa and some now abroad that are out here with us are now bringing our teachings back to the forefront, our oral teachings. That's where this comes from. And there's question and answer session. This is like an interview, kind of like what Alex Haley did. He interviewed his people and they had brought the historian out, and the historian began to converse with him, the story, the oral traditions, or the history of their tribe, his family tribe. So that's, again, that's how this was given out. So we're discussing the causes we're looking at the causes of illness. And so I don't know what this question, I think it's starting in the middle of something here. It says, are they edible? Are they like chickens and cows and fruits? Okay, and so I don't know, I didn't read that chapter before this. It says, none of the animals are used for food. So my son would love that. He's the vegan. You don't like food, you don't like meat. So it says some of the plants are edible. Okay, and all prototype plants used for food are called trees of life. Okay, they are used by leaders to prolong their lives beyond the normal 7,000 year lifespan. The elders live over 700 years using the trees of life as nourishment. Again, this is the oral teachings, and we know they're not living that way today. 7,000 years. This right here is one of the reasons why we had to stay with the Torah, because we can prove that people don't live that long now because people are dying at 100 years old or 50 years old. This would have to have been in the historical time, way back even before, Adam couldn't even been here, because Adam didn't even live 1,000 years. So we have to question this. When was this? Okay. Now we know that previously we talked about before in the other heavens. Everything here, it was already in the other heavens. In the other heavens, it's eternity. So that's what this would have been before the manifestation of men on the earth, because on the earth is ordained 120 years. Okay. Some people, say they're 128 years old. I think somebody was 128 years old, but was gone soon after transition. Okay. The question was, can anybody ever actually live that long? Believe it, you soon will witness it. Well, that's in the future. When Messiah comes, yes, our lifespans will go to that. But the reason they can go to that is because at one time it was that way. But that was before, again, this mankind. They would have lived that way. But for us on this earth at this time, no. Okay. In the other earth, in the perfect creation, before the fall, they could have lived that long. Okay. But after the fall, no. After the fall, that was shut down. When Adam sinned, that was shut down. Okay. But again, we know that in the future, yes, we will. It says because the old man is going to be 100 years old, it's going to be like a child or something like that. So that's in our Bibles today. That is actually in there. That in the future, when Messiah is here, when the Father comes down and actually lives amongst us. Okay. When Yeshua comes and lives amongst us, and the Father is here, he says, my name should be one, and I will be one, and my name should be one. When that day comes, then you'll see that. Okay. What causes sickness? That's the question. Are there separate causes for every illness, or is there one genetic reason why people become ill? We can answer that right ourselves, can't we? There are very different reasons for illness. Okay. And there are genetic reasons. We pass things on genetically. Yes, that. Okay. So this may sound strange to most people, but among people of Black nation in their natural environment, there is no sickness. We're not in our natural environment. Okay. In our natural environment, I could see that. But today, we're not in our natural environment, not even on the continent of Africa. They've been infiltrated by Europe. And believe it or not, that affects us because they transfer their diseases with them, and they inflict us, infuse us with different Ebola and stuff like that. They bring those things or brought those things to us. Even syphilis and gonorrhea, stuff like that came from bestiality, and then a man got it, and he sent it to a woman, or a woman got it, she gave it to a man, and then And then they raped us and gave it to us. You see, that's how we got it. They raped us and got us, you know, and sodomized us and got us sick. Then they took blankets with smallpox and gave it to the Indians. So they brought death and destruction on the people. Okay. That was the beast. The 666 people did that. Okay. I didn't mean to put that out. But the beast did that. Okay. Sickness did not exist before 6,000 years ago and will cease to exist after the end of this cycle. Okay. We kind of looked at that earlier again when we looked at the introduction to BlackRoots science. Okay. All sickness is caused by neglecting some aspect of your character. Okay, that will sound even strange to all modern people who have been raised and educated to believe in the physical cause of illness alone. Every illness is related to some aspect of your character. So that's why it's important to do what? Take on the attributes of the Father. Now, we have the tree of life, and it gives us 10 attributes that we're to live by. And some of them and the biggest ones are justice and mercy, but it starts off with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and then justice and mercy, and you know. So those are, and if you look at the New Testament, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Those are the things that we should, or those are characteristics that we are to live. Okay, so that's us. And that is why it says he will remove sickness from, that's why the scripture says, and I will remove sickness from amongst you. Why? Because our character will change. When we line up with the Torah, our character will change. You see? And so, and that's how sickness and disease is removed from us. All right. So our character, he says, the body is the unity of all aspects of character, and neglecting one or more of them results in illness in the corresponding part of the corresponding part of the body. So the Chinese, the Easterners they talk about the meridians of when I studied martial arts, I studied this, the meridians, okay, and the pressure points in the body, okay. So, and it talks about how to help, you know, pain and hurt and stuff like that. That's where they get their teaching from. This is some of where they get their teachings from on that, okay? Is among our people in our natural environment, there's no neglect of any part of our character. We also know the proper foods to eat and the right time to eat them. So sickness does not have the slightest chance to exist. Now, back here, as we know the proper foods to eat and the right time to eat them, you know, we have our kashrut law, right? But when the Shulchan Aruch, when we study it in Shulchan Aruch, and we're gonna have to go back and review that again, it tells us when to eat and how to eat. It gives instructions. That instruction came from us. That came from our forefathers, okay? And we don't follow those things. We eat whenever we feel like it, but the body is designed to eat when it is necessary, when it needs food. So when we get up, it says the first thing you should do in the morning, you got to have a big breakfast, and they drill that into us, but it's not necessary. You may only need to drink water in the morning, and then later on they may have a meal. I know that the Rambam would only eat one meal a day. He would do all the teaching, do all this, and only eat one meal a day. Of course, you know that will keep you slim, of course, and it doesn't overwork your body. And I believe that in the teaching on the Shabbat, when Akoda Lisa and Minister Michael were teaching on, they talked about this aspect. I don't know if they of eating in the morning and stuff like that. So some of that I remember a little bit of that. All right. So if we follow the teachings of our elders, our teachings, if we would, I'm going to have to, I'm going to do the common code, and then I'm going to do this next week. This is all we're going to do next week. This right here, we're going to focus on this next week. If we go back to our teachings, but we have to study it so that we can understand what they're talking about when they talk about like 7,000 years. And so we have to understand the context of when those things happen and when they're going to happen again. And also we'll understand, because I'll have to look at our Shulchan Aruch, because these things come out of the Shulchan Aruch came from this. I'll put it that way. Teachers in the Shulchan Aruch, because remember, the people who did the Mishnah and Mishnah Torah were our fathers. When you start getting into the Shulchan Aruch, they've taken the teachings that we had and put it so that they can understand it. Okay, that's all it is, but it's still our teachings, and we have to go back and understand that these are our teachings, and the mystical aspects that they talk about in Kabbalah and the Zohar, those came from our teachings, and it's here in our BlackRoots sciences. But we're told that we're not supposed. It's not good because it's not. They can't endorse it because they want to have control over us. But understand this also. Remember, again, in the Parasha, it talks about the angel talking to Abraham and Abraham talking to the angel. And he says, when we go back to our teachings, the way that it was originally taught to us, we will again experience speaking with the angels in times of need. And when we have questions, they will actually, and they want to, they desire to. Our Father desires to manifest himself. That's why Yeshua said, if 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I'll be in their midst. He's saying they want to come to us and sup with us. The angels are our ministers. They are ministers for us. Now, we're not to seek them, right? We seek the word and we seek answers, and they are dispatched when we need them. Okay? We don't worship angels. And we don't put a lot, but because we know that they are the servants, they come to help us, right? And they will help us to get an understanding of what we need and what we don't need. All right. And again, that's another reason why we release the power of the Holy Spirit to operate in our lives, because it's through that power of the Holy Spirit that we, again, are able to touch the hem of the Father's garment. In other words, we're able to converse with him through the Malachim, or the angels that he sends to us. But without the help of the Holy Spirit, you will never experience that. Okay. And so these teachings are in the realm of probability and possibility, but I see it happening in the millennium when Messiah comes, because right now we're too entangled into this system of the world. We've just been too contaminated and touched by the world in order for us to actually flow in the power that has been given to us. He says the common cold, and I'm gonna stop here at this one. Even the common cold, isn't it obvious that a common cold is caused by stress? When weather changes, especially from one season to the next, it exerts an external stress on the body. If the body is already under the internal stress of modern life, then you easily become prey to viruses. You could remove all internal stresses, thereby restoring that aspect of your character. External stresses would have no effect on you. Let me talk about that a little bit. When you go to Africa, when you go to the Middle East, you notice that they are laid back. They don't get in a hurry. When you go into Mexico, people are more laid back. The only place that I know of on the earth where people are pushing and people are stressed, under stress, is in the United States. And those places that are run by companies or corporations from this country. When you go into Sweden, they don't operate that way. When you go into Africa, they definitely don't operate that way. But in this country, they put stress on people on the job with unnecessary stress. They work you 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days at a time. If they can, they get as many days, 45. I've worked as many as 45 days in a row. I know people that work 90 days in a row, 12 hours a day. Now, if that's not stress, you see. And so we're killing ourselves under this system that we're living in and working in. But when you go to the continent of Africa, I was going to say, you know, and we have this in our DNA. We call it Black folks time. Because we, you know, see, I have to deal with this because I've been so regimented in this system that I used to get headaches. I'd be mad being late because the system had so conditioned me that I had to be on time. And that puts stress on everybody around me. And we have to get out of that. But the only way we're going to beat that is to get into our own system. All right. And so, you know, when you've been in traffic and people are just not in a hurry and they're just taking their time and you want to get where you want to go, and you get stressed. They're not stressed, but you're stressed, you see. So we have to learn how to deal with that. This system that we're in has conditioned many of us, not all of us, but many of us have been conditioned by the system to put stress, undue stress on ourselves for the job, for the workforce. When I worked in the oil company and I was working in the safety department, we used to have all these seminars and things talking and dealing with stress. And one of the things, instead of, you know, we know that the corporation was not going to change. So what we said, we have to change our behavior because the corporation is not going to change. They want you there on time. So what you have to do is pace yourself so you can take your time, leave home, give yourself enough time to be at work. So I used to leave home and be at work an hour before my time. If I was there 30 minutes before time, I felt like I was late. But I would be there early, get myself a coffee and sit back, relax, and find out what's going on, get the news for what's going on, and I just be relaxed. You know, when I was in management, over the engineer field engineers, my boss says, why don't you come in at 8 o'clock? I said, if I come in at 8 o'clock, I got to, first of all, fight that 7 o'clock traffic. And then when I get here at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be pissed off. And I got to deal with all these people coming to my office, and somebody's not going to be happy. So just let me continue to come in. When y'all get here, I'm there at 6 o'clock. I've got my reports. I know what's going on in the field. I know who's in jail and who I need to get out of jail. I know where the accidents are. I know everything, most of the things that are going on before the rest of the people came in at 8 o'clock. The other managers came in. My stuff was done. My reports were already done. When they're just starting, I'd be relaxing. See, now they get mad at me because because they didn't want to be there at 6, but I didn't have that stress. And because I wasn't stressed, I didn't put stress on my people. They were not stressed and they enjoyed their work. Now, before I took over the department, they were walking around with Maalox, having heart attacks. And I went and I changed all that stuff. The culture changed. Take the stress off the people so that they can live and have a healthy life. So I'm saying that because I've experienced that in life myself, how the job, we create stress. This system is designed to put stress on you, and it kills us when we're in this system. So we have to take advantage, take to heart. We can control, there are some things we can do to control that stress would keep from getting sick. You know, there were years I went without getting sick at all. See, because managing stress helps. All right, for years. And I didn't experience sickness until, at the congregation over there, in Kingwood, I got sick over there for the first time in years. Got the flu. And so we can go without getting sick. We can do it. We can do it. And it's possible. But again, once we return to our way of eating and managing our time, so we can relieve some of the stress and not put stress on other people. Again, I know, but that's a personal thing with me with that, the system, how it actually affected me being that way. But I said, I'm learning now to relax and not, let those things time, you know, I just have to schedule it so that I, you know, can be there. I still don't like to be late. I don't like to be late. You know, I hate being late. That's, you know, I don't want to change that. I want to be on time. But when other people are late, I just have to just let it go. You know, I just have to let it go because, yeah, I don't want to put stress on people, you know, and life goes on. Everything is okay. You know, we just move on from right there. And, you know, that takes practice, by the way. That takes a lot of practice to get to that. I'm still working on it. Probably I'll get there where I can just really just, you know, be on colorful time all the time. Just, you know, I should say on Hebrew time all the time, you know. So I'm actually gonna stop on this part now, unless you have any questions or something you want to discuss on that. Because I think this will tie in with, again, this will tie in with our health classes too, you know, talking about this on Shabbat when we talk about this. But next Tuesday, we're going to come back to this. I'm going to put a pin on it. Well, this will be easy because it's dealing with health. And we'll come back here and spend our time on this. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording is what I'm going to, first I'll stop the share. And then